Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Steve Orsini, President and CEO of the Council of Ontario Universities, and it is my pleasure to kick off today's proceedings. I am so pleased to be here today. Ontario Universities welcome today's landmark investment by the Ontario government. This is a bold, substantial investment in higher education. Today's announcement comes at a pivotal time. Ontario is facing greater economic uncertainty, increasing global competition, and growing demand for highly skilled talent. Universities are critical to meeting those challenges. We educate the workforce and generate the research and innovation that support our businesses and attract investment to communities across Ontario. This new investment strengthens the very foundation our universities provides greater sustainability and long-term planning to support our students and local communities. Since 2020, the number of high school students applying to an Ontario university has increased by 18.5%. This investment will ensure that more students can access high-demand programs that are critical to Ontario's economic future. Today's announcement will provide the needed resources to sustain and enhance the core programs and services that students rely on, including mental health supports, career services, expanded co-op and work-integrated learning opportunities aligned with labor market needs. Ontario universities remain committed to student access and affordability. Universities invest more than $1.4 billion annually in financial assistance to help students with the greatest financial need access a university education. Universities will also continue to do their part. We have a long history of driving greater efficiencies through shared services, joint procurement, and digital transformation. We remain committed to ensuring every dollar is used responsibly and delivers value for students and taxpayers. Today's announcement reflects a strong partnership between the province, businesses, and the post-secondary sector. Together, we are building the skilled workforce, advancing research and innovation, and strengthening Ontario's economy. Now, I have the distinct honor of inviting someone I've known for many years and someone who's a very close partner to COU and the university sector. I now invite Maureen Adamson, President and CEO of Collèges Ontario, to say a few words.
Thank you, Steve. It's an honor to stand beside you once again. Good morning and welcome. I'm Maureen Adamson, as mentioned, President and CEO of Collèges Ontario, and I have the privilege of representing all 24 amazing colleges across the province. Thank you all for joining us to mark this truly generational investment in Ontario's economic future. I'd like to begin by thanking Premier Doug Ford for his leadership and for the government's continued commitment to Ontario public colleges and to building a strong and resilient economy. Minister Quinn, I cannot thank you enough for your remarkable leadership and for your deep understanding of our sector that brings us here for today's announcement. This investment reflects the priorities set out in 2025 Ontario budget, a plan to protect Ontario, a clear commitment to developing the highly skilled workforce that powers Ontario's economy, and an economy where college graduates are in every corner of the province. There is no question that the past few years have been challenging for Ontario colleges and universities, with a collision of unprecedented pressures, including the most significant enrollment disruption our sector has ever experienced. And these were not easy times. They required difficult decisions by strong college leaders, and I'm proud to stand with Glenn Volbrick and Daniel Giroux, two presidents today of colleges. But Ontario's colleges did what we've always done. We leaned in. We focused on efficiency. We made tough but necessary choices, and we stayed anchored to our core purpose, serving students, employers, and communities across this province. That is why today's announcement matters so much. This investment is a game changer for the economic future of this province. It is a giant step forward. Ontario public college graduates are essential across a wide range of industries, including advanced manufacturing, construction, transportation, mining and energy, and healthcare. College graduates are the boots on the ground. Skilled workers are needed more than ever, and this funding expands regional opportunities for learners and employers alike. It strengthens local communities, supports innovation, and ensures students and graduates are prepared to make an immediate and meaningful impact. Ontario colleges have proven that they are true engines of the economy, and we have met every challenge head-on with this investment, we are well positioned to continue delivering for Ontario, for all of our communities, and we will not take our foot off the gas. Minister Quinn, today you are making history in our sector. On behalf of all Colleges Ontario, we are deeply grateful for your passion, commitment, and most importantly, your leadership. And it is now my pleasure and privilege to introduce Daniel Tisch, CEO of Ontario Chamber of Commerce and a champion of our sector.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this really exciting day. It's funny because today I think back to early 2024. It was my first week at the Ontario Chamber in January of 24, and that was that very week that the federal government announced massive cutbacks in foreign study permits. And you know who were some of the strongest voices in our province about the challenges facing our post-secondary educational system? It was Ontario's 150 local chambers of commerce and boards of trade. These are who represent together 60,000 businesses across our province. And the reason they were vocal is because Ontario's post-secondary institutions play so many roles in our local communities. They keep our bright talent here at home. They partner with local employers to develop new programs. They train workers at every career stage in the skills that they need for a changing economy. They strengthen local workforces. They produce research and discovery and innovation that make businesses more productive and workers more valuable. They fuel local and provincial and national economies. And with Ontarians and Canadians right now determined to turn an historic threat into a moment of historic opportunity, we need these institutions more than ever. And that's why stable, long-term funding for the post-secondary education is one of the top priorities of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. If we want a more competitive and a more self-reliant and a more resilient Ontario, we have to skill up and we have to scale up. That means preparing more people for in-demand careers. It means strengthening the programs that power our key sectors, and that's what this announcement today does. It also means making investments not just for a single year or a single term in office, but for a generation. And it's essential that institutions have the flexibility to increase tuition in line with inflation, given the immense value of the product and the imperative to keep investing in its quality, as long as we target financial support to the students and families who need it. So today's announcement is a huge step forward. But we still have a lot of work to do together. We need stronger partnerships between programs and employers. We need stronger partnerships between institutions and local chambers of commerce, not just for consultation, but for co-creation of the programs of the future. We need more micro-credentials tailored for today's workers and their employers. We need faster turnaround between program conception and program delivery so that workers can begin delivering value in the workplace on day one by having more students participate in work-integrated learning. We need permeable pathways between places of work and places of learning throughout our entire careers. And finally, at our time when our southern neighbor is turning away global talent, Ontario can be a magnet to attract the world's best and brightest researchers. I believe we can, and after today's announcement, I'm more confident than ever that we will. Minister Bethlenfalvy and I have been talking about this issue for 2 years. He'll tell you I raise it in every conversation we have. It'll now be maybe every second conversation, Minister. And I'm sure Minister Quinn would say the same thing. But this really is a moment for leadership, because I know how many competing demands there are for public funds. I know every stakeholder says to the Minister of Finance, we're not an expense, we're an investment. But with post-secondary education, this is indisputably true. There is no greater investment a country can make in its talent, in its people, and in its future. So I want to thank Ontario's universities, colleges, Indigenous institutes, and local chambers of commerce for their advocacy. I congratulate Minister Quinn, Minister Bethlenfalvy, and Premier Ford for both listening and leading. Ontario is building the infrastructure of the future. Ontario is attracting the industries of the future. And today, Ontario is investing in the talent of the future. Thank you so much. And it's my great privilege to invite the Honourable Peter Bethlenfalvy, Minister of Finance, to take the stage.
Thank you, Dan, for those great comments. Thank you for your leadership. It's true. He has been talking to me for years and about this, and he was pushing on an open door. Before I begin my remarks, I just want to tell the people of Tumbler Ridge, our thoughts, our prayers are with you. This is a tragedy that we across Canada are feeling, each and every one of us. And as the Premier Doug Ford said yesterday, anything we can do to help, we're there for the people of Tumbler Ridge and the people of British Columbia. So good morning, everyone, and thank you again, Dan. Thank you, Stephen Orsini. Thank you, Maureen Adamson. Thank you for the college presidents for being here and the assembled bevy of parliamentary assistants, Deepak Anand and Lauren Coe. There you are. Thank you all for joining us today. This is an historic day. And as you know, Ontario continues to navigate a period of global economic and geopolitical uncertainty. That is why our government is continuing to deliver on our plan to protect Ontario and create a province that is more competitive, more resilient, and more self-reliant. A strong post-secondary sector is essential to Ontario's long-term economic growth and competitiveness. In fact, I was just at TMU, Toronto Metropolitan University, with Martin Redcon at the Democracy Forum, and they didn't miss an opportunity to tell me again how important the university and college system is to Ontario's long-term economic growth and competitiveness. Our colleges and universities prepare the workforce of tomorrow. They drive innovation, and they anchor communities across the province. If we want a strong Ontario tomorrow, we need to strengthen our post-secondary institutions today. Now, from a fiscal perspective, stability matters. Predictable, transparent funding and responsible planning is imperative for the long-term financial sustainability of publicly funded colleges and universities in order to hire faculty, invest in infrastructure, and most importantly, support students. Students and families also need confidence that the system they are entering is financially sound and focused on outcomes. And sustainability means ensuring that our post-secondary system remains viable not just for the next year, but for the long term. Because at the end of the day, this is about student success, to make sure they have strong institutions that prepare them for the careers of tomorrow. This is also why our government continues to invest in students before post-secondary, with a focus on in-demand vocations such as skilled trades, education, healthcare, science and skilled trades. This is vital to the health and growth of Ontario's economy, offering our students paths that lead to secure jobs and a good quality of life. As Minister of Finance, my focus is on ensuring that every dollar invested delivers value for students, for taxpayers, and for Ontario's economy. And it is more important than ever we continue to uphold our promise to the people of Ontario to manage the province's finances responsibly, to build a more resilient and self-reliant economy to secure long-term prosperity. Post-secondary education is one of Ontario's most important long-term investments. And today's announcement helps ensure that the investment remains strong, responsible, and sustainable for years to come. I want to give my heartfelt thank you to my colleague, Minister Nolan Quinn, for his leadership, for his ability to bring many stakeholders together, to think outside the box, be innovative, and most importantly, have students at the center of every decision we're announcing today. So on behalf of our government, I'd like to pass the baton over to Minister Nolan Quinn.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Minister Bethlenfalvy, for that kind introduction, and thank you all for joining us today. We've been working towards this moment for a long time, and it's great to finally be here. When our government was elected for a historic third mandate almost a year ago, we were elected to fulfill a promise to protect Ontario. Because just a few weeks prior to that election, our world experienced what we now know was part of the largest trade disruption we've seen in decades. And with every threat that was launched at Canada came a threat against Ontario workers, families, and businesses. And that is something our government simply could not accept. For the last year, we've stood shoulder to shoulder with Ontario workers, businesses, and families. We've stood toe-to-toe against bullies, we've stood up for our homeland, and we've stood steadfast in the face of adversity. Because that is what needs to be done to protect jobs, protect communities, and protect everything that makes Ontario an incredible place to live. And our support for Ontario's world-class colleges, universities, and Indigenous institutes has been no different. When federal changes to international student policy launched Canada's post-secondary sector into unprecedented instability 2 years ago, threatening the system's ability to deliver high-quality education and research and build Ontario's talent pipeline, we were there for our institutions, investing $1.3 billion to stabilize the sector and ensure they could continue delivering world-class education. And when the federal government destabilized the sector yet again with further policy changes in 2025, we stepped up with nearly $1 billion to expand enrollment in critical economy-driving sectors. Because we know in order to protect Ontario, to protect our workers, to protect our businesses, and most importantly, to protect our communities, we must protect our colleges, universities, and Indigenous institutes. Our post-secondary institutions are the pipeline that builds our future workforce. It is in these schools that we are educating the next life-saving surgeon, entrepreneur, and skilled worker who will drive our economy in their future careers. If we want Ontario to have a competitive workforce tomorrow, we need to strengthen our post-secondary institutions today. And that's exactly what our government is doing. Ontario's post-secondary sector is facing unprecedented pressures that impact the system's ability to deliver high-quality education and build Ontario's talent pipeline. That's why we are taking decisive action now in order to ensure Ontario's post-secondary sector is preparing students for in-demand jobs that address labour market needs, and that it remains accessible for future generations, and that the sector is sustainable for the long term. We have a plan to build post-secondary sector that is based on 3 principles: preparing students for rewarding in-demand careers that meet labour market needs, preserving Ontario's student access high-quality post-secondary education while supporting their ability to appropriately invest in their education and success, and providing Ontario's post-secondary sector with long-term sustainability by continuing to ensure funding for the sector is being used to further Ontario's position as an epicenter for workforce development and world-class research. To protect students' access to the education they need to launch successful careers and ensure the province's world-class institutions continue producing one of the most competitive workforces in the G7 for generations to come, the Ontario government is making the following changes. We are investing a historic $6.4 billion in additional funding to our colleges, universities, and Indigenous institutes through a new funding model. This is the largest investment in post-secondary education in Ontario and Canadian history, bringing reliable, predictable funding to the sector for years to come. Starting in the 26-27 academic year, our new long-term funding model will provide $7 billion in operating funding to the sector every single year. That is a 30% increase over this year's funding. With this new model, we're funding over 70,000 new seats in high-demand programs like STEM, healthcare, teacher education, and the trades, expanding the programs students want to create the workforce Ontario needs. This historic long-term funding model will sustain the sector for generations to come, supporting world-class research and ensuring Ontario students will always graduate ready to protect Ontario's economy no matter what we may face. The second pillar of our plan is to stabilize the sector by modernizing Ontario's tuition framework. When our government took office in 2018, we had the highest tuition in Canada. To make education more affordable, our government cut tuition by 10% and froze it in 2019. That decision provided predictable access to post-secondary education for families of all incomes. But now, amid the federal government's repeated decisions that have destabilized post-secondary education across all of Canada, we must face the reality that our post-secondary landscape is very different than it was in 2019. In order to achieve financial stability, our institutions must be able to diversify their revenue beyond the government, while still keeping costs low for students. That's why we're allowing publicly assisted colleges and universities to raise tuition by up to 2%, while maintaining one of the lowest tuition increase rates in the whole country, below comparable jurisdictions like British Columbia and Manitoba. For the average university student, that means only 47 cents per day and 18 cents per day for college students. Students with low income will have this increase fully covered through our new enhanced student access guarantee. This modest tuition increase will maintain affordability for students and families while also ensuring institutions can sustain themselves for years to come. The last pillar of our plan is a stronger, more sustainable OSAP system. Last November, the federal government announced they would no longer offer grants to career college students effective this August. This decision, along with a recent increase in uptake of OSAP, has created a $2.3 billion pressure on our system. With no action, this pressure would decimate OSAP, making it unavailable for future generations. To ensure higher education remains accessible while supporting students' investment in their education, we will bring our grant and loan allocation into better alignment with the other provinces. In line with the changes made by the federal government, we will be removing grant eligibility for career colleges starting this fall. Furthermore, moving forward, a maximum of 25% of OSAP funding will be provided as grants and 75% as loans. And let me be very clear, OSAP loans are not like standard bank loans. These loans do not accrue interest while the student is attending school. And when the student is in their career working, interest rates are extremely low at prime plus 1%. These changes will keep post-secondary education accessible for Ontario students while allowing them to appropriately invest into their success and future careers. These decisions will preserve student access to education while keeping OSAP sustainable for decades to come. If we have learned anything in the last year of instability across the globe, it is that Ontario must be ready. We cannot sit idly by while external forces decide our future. We must take decisive action to protect what we hold dear and safeguard our own destiny. And that is what we are doing today. Our province's greatest competitive advantage has always been our people. And this plan puts them at the center by protecting access to education they need to land rewarding, in-demand careers, and ensuring the province's world-class institutions can continue producing one of the most competitive workforces in the G7 for generations to come. This plan doesn't just protect our Ontario, it protects our children's Ontario. In closing, I want to thank our exceptional post-secondary partners from Colleges Ontario, Council of Ontario Universities, and the Indigenous Institutes Consortium. To every president at our institutions, and of course, our students and the hardworking post-secondary educators across the whole province. Together, we're building a more resilient, competitive Ontario, and I couldn't be more proud to do it alongside all of you. Thank you.
We will now begin media availability at the microphone. Please state your name and publication. The format is one question, one follow-up.
Minister, you've taken...
Hi, it's Chris Rishowie from the Toronto Star. The university and college sectors had each been asking for $1 billion over the next year. So the funding you've provided, combined with the tuition increase, is that going to be enough to stave off more cuts, or are you expecting to see some efficiencies?
Well, the historic $6.4 billion of funding that we're providing, the largest in Canadian history, is going to ensure that we have stability and sustainability of the sector. We need balance across the whole sector, but everyone needs to be at the table, including Colleges, Ontario, and Council of Ontario Universities. There are still more efficiencies that need to be found across the whole sector, but this will ensure that colleges and universities that are making their decisions for the fall have sustainability moving forward in the next coming years.
And you've allowed for a small tuition increase, but you've made big changes to OSAP. And I'm just wondering, with fewer grants available, are you not shifting the burden onto students when affordability is already a concern?
With OSAP and the changes we are doing, we're now more in line with the other jurisdictions and provinces right across Canada, including the federal government. We want to ensure that while we're investing into the system, students are also investing into their future careers. But I will just remind everyone in the room, as I mentioned earlier, we have a student access guarantee, and we're going to work with our institutions to enhance that moving forward. So all of our low-income students will have the support they need to attend post-secondary education.
Hello, Laura Stone, Globe and Mail. Just on the grants issue, can you just explain what problem are you trying to solve here? Like, why are you limiting the grants? What's the issue that you're seeing, other than saying it's in line with the federal government? What's the problem?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, the federal government did make changes to the career colleges in making it 100% loans and grants. That did put pressure on OSAP, as well as the significant growth in OSAP at the career colleges. Over 225% growth since 2020 puts a $2.3 billion pressure on OSAP moving forward. And this will ensure that OSAP is sustainable, not just for these students, but for future generations of students as well.
And can we just hear from the university and colleges sector what you make of the changes to OSAP? Do you think this will be limiting for some students and have a negative impact?
Well, universities really have a long history of supporting access and affordability. We invest $1.4 billion a year in student financial grants, bursaries, scholarships. They're all grants, non-repayable. We believe, working with the province, we can tailor the assistance that we provide to help the students in the greatest need. This is going to allow us to target to ensure that students can still have access, but the revenues we receive is also going to go to the other services that students need, such as mental health, which is with incidents are growing rapidly within our institutions. We're going to be able to provide more career counseling. So it's a complete package of supports for students. But we're committed to working with the province to ensure that those in greatest need get access to university education.
And colleges?
Thank you. I think what's really important is that this is a generational investment, and the OSAP changes are part of a big investment. And certainly for colleges, the access mandate will continue and will be very strong, and that is something that's very important to us.
Minister, the consistently opposed to lifting the freeze on tuition. Can you take me through maybe some of those cabinet deliberations? What happened? What was the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, that convinced the Premier that now was the time to lift the tuition cap?
Well, the landscape has changed significantly since 2019, but those savings that in the freeze that we have and the tuition cut will be seen for decades to come for our future students. It saved $1,800 per university student and $450 annually per college student. But with the federal government's unilateral changes, whether it's on the OSAP side or on the international student population, it has created pressure on the system, and we just want to ensure the system is sustainable for years to come.
Tuition is not necessarily always paid by students, it's paid by the parents as well. Do you feel like this is unfair in the moment of an affordability crisis to put more on the backs of families in this province when you yourself, your government yourself, has a long time frozen those rates? Is this fair?
That is why we're enhancing the student access guarantee, but I'll just remind everyone it is a 2% modest increase. Since we've frozen tuition in 2019, the average tuition rates across Canada have gone up 18 to 41%. Understanding the sector has changed, and we want to ensure sustainability for future generations.
How much money will the OSAP changes save the province in terms of reducing the grants?
Well, as I mentioned, in August we have a $2.3 billion pressure on OSAP, but I'll pass it over to the Minister of Finance to give a bit more of the financial details of that.
I guess that's why they brought along old money bags. You know, obviously that will have some changes. I stood right here 2 days ago outlining those pressures on our third quarter results. We'll be updating the numbers in the budget that I know many of you hope I will announce when the date is today, but I'm going to disappoint you yet again. I'm not telling you when the budget's going to be, but we're going to be updating all the numbers then.
Minister, in line with the changes to more heavily weight OSAP towards loans, are you considering any changes to the interest, like more of a grace period before it starts accruing interest?
So at this point, we are focusing on the enhanced student access guarantee to ensure that lower income students will always have access to our post-secondary sector. But the interest-free loan while in their studies, as I mentioned earlier, it is not your standard bank loan. It is offered to every student's entitlement process to have interest-free while they're in their studies before they start their career is really essential part of the program.
You had mentioned the growth in career college students accessing OSAP. Is that kind of mainly what's behind this big increase for the OSAP budget, or can you talk a bit more about the factors?
As I did mention, there is a 245% increase at career colleges, but it is the demographics of our OSAP students that are changing as well. It's putting more pressure on the system, so this will ensure sustainability and balance for the system for the next generation of students, including my own children that are going to come forward. That $2.3 billion pressure on OSAP was unsustainable. We want to ensure that all students in future generations have access to OSAP as well.
In the deck, you give some examples of programs that are going to be receiving more money. For colleges, you talk about welding, engineering, that funding is going up. So are there also programs that are going to be receiving less money?
Across the whole system, we will see a 6% increase on all students, a 30% increase on part-time college students, which was a long-standing challenge for the sector. That's part of our $1.1 billion for every single student, but we are focusing on core priorities of the economy and our government priorities. So in STEM, skilled trades, teaching, and healthcare as well.
And you keep bringing up Trump and Protect Ontario. I am honestly struggling to see how this connects because you've frozen tuition fees for years. Can you just, I don't know if there's a better way to say it, or is this just, language to fit with what we're seeing on the podium there?
Absolutely. Since Trump has come into power, we've seen investments going south of the border. And I know when Minister Fidel travels the world selling Ontario, one of the number one things he sells is the 75% attainment rate of post-secondary students across Ontario. We lead Canada and the G7, and we want to ensure under this heightened pressure of Donald Trump's presidential term that we're including our post-secondary sector so that we have those investments come to Ontario. The reason they are coming to Ontario is because of our world-class institutions and the graduates we're producing. So this is going to ensure that we're producing even more STEM graduates for the jobs of tomorrow.
Minister, some of the people behind you have been asking for those funding increases and the lift on the tuition cap for quite a while before Trump, while Biden was in power. Can you explain why all of a sudden Ontario is reacting to an American president to determine how to fund our colleges and universities?
As I've mentioned, this is because of our federal government's changes, whether it's on the international student file or the federal government's changes on the OSAP file has put more pressure on us. But as I just mentioned earlier, Donald Trump has put more pressure on investments across the whole globe, and we want to ensure that we're at the forefront, and our graduates are essential to ensure that we land those investments here in Ontario.
So you're saying if there was a Democratic president and it was not Donald Trump, your government wouldn't have increased funding for post-secondary institutions?
Ultimately, as I've mentioned, the federal government has made significant changes to the sector, not just in Ontario, but right across all of Canada. We're reacting to the federal government's changes. They've created a $4.4 billion hole in our budgets of our post-secondary sector right across Ontario, as well as Canada. But I'll pass it over to Minister Bethlenfalvy to provide further detail.
Yeah, thank you, Minister Nolan Quinn. I think what we're saying is the world has changed, and there's many things that we can do here in Canada, independent of what's going on around us. Our education system, world-class education, K-12 and post-secondary education, is absolutely critical. And if I can just bring it back to something in Ontario, our nuclear energy build-out, refurbishing the 4 nuclear stations in Pickering, is going to require almost 30,000 new construction jobs and eventually 6,700 full-time jobs. That's right here in Ontario. We got to make sure that we have a continued pipeline of skilled trades, of engineers, physicists, the whole range, because they're going to be employed for a long time. So while the world is changing around us, we're making sure that we are putting in place, not only for today, but for tomorrow, long-term sustainable funding and investments so that we can continue to prosper as a province, as a country.
To get back to one of Laura's questions, we have funding for in-demand programs, high-cost priority programs. This is the long-term funding model, so obviously demand will change over time. Who's making those decisions, and what are you considering?
The students are making those decisions. The economy is making those decisions. We've seen significant growth in STEM enrollment, and that was part of our $750 million investment as part of Budget 2025. We are focusing on where the labour market needs are across the economy, the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow.
Why did you wait so long to, fund this sector? We've seen program cuts right across Ontario at various colleges. We've seen campuses close. So why did you wait so long to do this?
As I mentioned in my remarks earlier, we invested $1.3 billion in January 2024 whenever the federal government put their initial cap. The federal government has been at the podium many times making further changes to the sector, and that's why we invested another almost $1 billion, including $750 million in 20,000 funded STEM seats. We're funding the critical labour market needs that our economy needs right now.
Do you regret allowing some campuses to close, programs to be cancelled?
There has been rebalancing going across the system, and that is something that has been clearly articulated since the federal government made repeated changes to the post-secondary sector. But I'll pass it over to Minister Bethlenfalvy to provide further detail on that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. No, I think the minister handled it very well. We didn't wait. I know I wrote the checks, that over $1 billion check. It wasn't just that. It was the $750 million additional funding for STEM seats, science, technology, engineering, and math. That's on top of the 70,000 that were funded, another 20,000. So we moved quickly to address the situation. We've got to deal with the environment that we have. As the minister is making patently clear, we don't control the international study permits. That's a federal government responsibility. And I want to really compliment the leadership of our colleges and our universities, the chambers of commerce, who together, working together collaboratively with government, are standing before you today to deal with the environment that we have, all for the benefit for our students and our frontline workers who educate our great people.
That now concludes today's press conference. Thank you.